Hey everyone, how's it going? In today's episode of the Cheap Bike Build Off, we're going from this to this. So in the last episode, we pretty much tore it down just to the basic frame. We've mocked it up for some parts that we're probably going to use on it. Don't know about the handlebar yet, but we're likely going to be using these tyres. Some chonky specialised butchers. They've got some cracks in them, but they're free, so really good for the budget build. We've got to clean the frame up a bit, it's gathered some dust and stuff. Going to go through the parts bins and find out what we're going to use on it. Quite like these brakes, might throw these on to go with the rest of the green on it. Don't know if we'll be keeping the stock wheels. So the last thing we've got to take off the bike before rebuilding it back up is the headset. Just going to take it all apart and re-grease it and put it back together. This bike was in pretty good condition, so I don't expect any of the bearings or anything to be in too bad a shape. Certainly reusable. They are just a bit dry. Needle bearings in the lower. Pretty cool. So yeah, pretty good shape, just a bit dry. This race here looks okay. We'll just put those in some degreaser and then clean them out while we clean up the frame. So it's just a bit dusty and stuff. We're just going to spray on some soapy water, give it a bit of a scrub down. Not really too much grime and stuff on the bike. Normally around the brake posts and stuff, sometimes there's a bit of grease in that, not too bad. Just a little bit on the inside of the rear dropout here. Not too bad though. So there's a couple of spots on the bike that need touching up, just some scratches. So I've gone over with the Dremel and cleaned those up just with a little wire brush. I'm going to be using some CRC rust converter on these patches. This basically just neutralizes the rust and it turns it black. So it'll sort of suit in with the paint job on the bike as well. As an added benefit. It's just going to set away. We'll be using these cranks on the bike. Really like square taper 104 BCD cranks. And we'll be using this freewheel, which is 18 tooth. So we're going something a little bit weird with this setup. We're going 2-speed. So we did a Diamondback with a 2-speed. Turns out it was a couple of years ago now. So we're going to do something similar, but the opposite, I guess you would say. We're going 2 rings up front and then just a single in the rear. To take up the chain slack, we will need a rear derailleur or chain tensioner of some sort. I do have some of those like single speed chain tensioners, which is basically just the arm that has a spring in it that can take up chain tension. Don't know if that alone, because it's just one pulley, I don't know if that alone will take up enough chain tension to go between the 2 front cogs. Otherwise, we can rock a rear derailleur as well as a front derailleur and just have the front derailleur shift and the rear one just take up the chain slack. I would like something a little bit more hidden, but I think for the ease of it and everything, just a rear derailleur is probably going to be our best bet. Then we can use the stock rear derailleur as well. It is quite a big thing. Normally, like a dingle speed, you just need like a road, like a nice small cage road derailleur. It can work really well. But with the budget and everything, I don't know if it's the best use of the money. What the fuck? I definitely ran worse condition chain rings. This doesn't look too good, but I'm sure it's got plenty of life left. Something good about these steel rings as well. So, pretty cool. Would be cool to strip these down, but because of this weird shape here and everything, it's going to be too difficult to sort of polish them up. Could repaint them? I don't know. So I think we'll pretty well leave it in this sort of condition. Pretty clean back here actually. masking tape here. Just gonna spray the whole thing, see how it goes. Crank that should do. Shit. It's definitely going to look different between the two paints, but I wanted to keep the Shimano there, so. Why does it look so glossy from matte finish? What the hell? So this is how the rust converter looks once it's all done its job and everything. This is okay to paint over, it acts as a bit of a primer. From here we're just going to throw the cranks in. For some reason I wanted to do this first, I don't know why. So I've got two bottom brackets to sort of get the right chain line. Do a bit of a rough eyeball here. So I've got a 110mm bottom bracket and then 124 or somewhere around there. So two pretty big jumps, but it's good to have a couple. So it looks like the skinnier one will give us the best chain line, but really you never know if the chain ring is going to hit. So I'm going to throw this in and test the cranks. Use a little bit of grease on the tapers there. And snug that up. So I want to do something a bit weird with this bike, where I don't want to use just a regular shifter mounted on the handlebar. For some reason I wanted to do like a bit of a weird remote mount shifter. I'll talk a bit more about that later, but you can do that a few different ways. You can use like some down tube shifters or something, or just mount it to an existing bolt or something. But for now we're just finishing up the cranks. Don't have any issues with that rubbing. Moving on to the stem now. We're going to be using this Pro Max cool stem. Quite like the style of it. Some of the bolts are a bit rusty though, so we're going to be taking those out. Not too bad, we could clean these up, but we've got some vapor rust, so we're going to be soaking a few things in that. As well as the seat post clamp. I don't know why the frame didn't drop there. The seat post, I guess, is just snug enough that it holds. So just going to be using a little bit of vapor rust in this small container here. It's starting to change colour, so probably about the end of its life. I never noticed this, but vapor rust, or they do a product to prevent future rusting. Some things that I tend to vapor rust, like headset cups and stuff, just externally they get a bit crusty looking, but these ones are in really good condition. So you can see the stem has some oxidization that we're going to be cleaning up. But first we're going to throw the headset in, just greasing up the bearings there, making sure they're all packed, and then going over a little bit. Quite a tidy steer tube on this bike. It doesn't have any internal rust apart from that one spot in the bottom bracket shell that we found. Oh fuck, I've got the seat post. Seat post clamp wasn't in, but we caught it. We could respray this, but that's pretty good as is. met again, silly washer nub. Not going to damage any threads ever. Castrating those washers one at a time. Is that? Oh no, we're missing. But they don't really destroy threads like the washers do because they're so much thicker. So back to tidying up the stem. We're going to be using, well, there's a few different ways that you can do it. You could use some sandpaper with some WD-40 or wet sanding it, or you can use some of these synthetic wools. This is the grey one. I think it has some equivalent to sandpaper, but just going to be using this with some WD-40. These are really good, they last a really long time, don't clog up like sandpaper does. Definitely recommend them. If you don't have any, grab some. Just grab them from Bunnings or something. So basically just sanding or scuffing up the whole stem. The grey one is a bit finer. I went over with the red one a bit and then back to the grey one. Then after that we're hitting it with a bit of wax. This is just to prevent it from further oxidizing in the future. If you want, you can hit it with Autosol. That's like a bit more polished looking though. I want it just sort of a brushed finish, so we just left it after the grey wool. Making sure that we're going to use a whole lot of grease in here because we don't want the stem to stuck in the stereo tube. And some more grease in here too. I use a toothbrush to spread the grease around. Just makes it sort of spread down a little bit better. Nice amount of grease oozing out there. So I quite like the look of the stem. There's some old Schwinn Cruisers and like a crane stem that this looks really similar to. Every bit of excess grease I put on the seat post and then throw it in the frame. So the handlebar, out of the corner of my eye, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this as I was working on the stem. And I had these pedals that I was planning on going to be using on it. So I thought, dang, I'm just going to use this handlebar. It would be cooler if it matched the decal pink, but it's a little bit faded and it suits the pedals quite nicely, so we're going to be throwing this on. So these pedals we got off a mate called James. Thanks for the pedals, James. Really cool pedals. When he gave them to me, he mentioned that they'll probably just need a service or something because the bearings feel a bit rough. So we're going to take them apart and see if they need re-greasing or just a bit of an adjustment. So you can see here there's plenty of grease in there. Bearings just feel a little bit rough though, but I think they're just a bit tight. So we're going to loosen off the locking nut and adjust the cone in them and then tighten it back down and see if that solves it. Definitely heaps of grease in there. So just use a screwdriver to adjust the cone nut that's underneath the locking nut and then tighten that back down and see how it spins. Feels quite nice. So people go on about bear trap pedals and stuff, how they're super damaging to their shins, and these are my shins, and all of these scars here are from just regular platform pedals. So the scars are because I didn't get stitches in my shins. Now I have these scars from my teenage years, but none of them were from bear trap pedals. Really nice big platform on these. They've got some bent teeth and stuff, but they're going to do just fine. It looks so cool. I find later in the video, after I complete the bike, that I've got a bottle cage that suits these as well. So the left side is really notchy. I can take that apart and service it as well. So this is that left one that was a bit notchy. It's way better now. So these are the wheels that came on the Shogun. The rims themselves are in really good condition. They have very little wear in them. Only issue is there's a little bit of rust on the spokes. Nothing too bad though. Probably just clean those up and if we don't have any spare spokes. And we're going to be running at single speed. So we could just lock the chain in one gear.
Oh.
But we can just take the freewheel off and thread on like a single speed freewheel.
Oh. Sad. It's a sad day.
I think this is just a, yeah, it is just a Shimano freewheel, but it sounds pretty cool. Like, listen to this. That's pretty cool. Weird. Okay, I'll count it. 37, 38, 39, 40, 42. So now, it'll be hard to show because there's so much overlap here. The spacer is quite big. Hard to see. You have a little spacer and then like the hub cone. So what we want to do is sort of even things out and then we can dish the rim to be recentered. So we've got the freewheel just loosely on there. So this needs to come over. So to move the hub over on the axle, we've got some of these smaller spacers that we're going to replace this big one with. We're just going to test it out, really. Undoing the locking nuts and taking off this big spacer. I'm going to try one that's about half the size and then make it up on the other side. So we'll have to move the axle across. Basically, we're going to end up servicing the hub, but basically you would just move the cone nut over and then add that spacer to the opposite side. Start cleaning out the bearings and everything while we're here. Look in pretty good condition, not covered in rust and everything. I quite like cleaning freewheel hubs just because, yeah, they don't have all the cassette hub or the free hub internals and everything, so you can really give them like a nice clean out. So I didn't have the spokes the right length, so we're just going to be cleaning off the rust of these. It's not too bad on them. A bit of WD-40 and giving a light cleaning with that sanding, that synthetic wool that we used earlier. Taking off the rim. Nope, that's a tyre. We're taking off the tyre and the rim tape and then throwing in some WD-40 into the nipples. You want to do this if the rim hasn't been touched for a while, just to make sure that you're not going to stack any spokes. It's been a long day.
Messed with the grease.
Throwing in some nice fresh grease into the hub and the bearings. So that's that side with the different spacer you can see there, and we're going to be testing out a bit of an eyeball method. So you can see there the wheel has shifted over a bit. So now to dish the rim over to the non-drive side, we're going to loosen the drive side off and then tighten up the non-drive side spokes. Hopefully the rim will be about centered in the frame where the tire's not going to rub, but we will see. So we're going around and loosening off the drive side spokes, 2 full rotations, and then we're going to the non-drive side and tightening those up. 2 full rotations as well, and that'll shift the rim over to the left or towards the non-drive side of the frame. And hopefully that'll be about centered after that. So that's pretty much what the rim centered back in with the frame. You can use this as a bit of a guide. It's not really true center. So with that little spacer adjustment, you can see the freewheel should be about in line with the chain rings now. Certainly a lot better, and the derailleur will make up for a small adjustment in chain line. So as it turns out, we're just swapping over the spacers from the drive side to the non-drive side. Obviously,
This isn't doable with every wheel. 2 full rotations on your nipples is quite a lot. That sounds a lot weirder than what it actually is. So make sure you've still got decent engagement of your nipples on the spokes. Yeah, because you... Whoop.
Just a few drops more than a little bit of oil.
You want your freewheels lubed and your nipples fully engaged on your spokes. Going to the tyres now. These are the butchers that we got from Nick, who's Heyday Bicycles on Instagram. Thanks for the tyres, Nick. They have quite a few cracks in them, so pretty reasonable, pretty understandable, I should say, that someone's going to throw these out. You can see here a bunch of cracks. Should be good for a few rides though. Really junky casing on them. The front is a 2.5 and we're going to throw the 2.3 on the rear. Still really big tyre on the back, but the Shogun has plenty of tyre clearance, so shouldn't be an issue for it. We did test them out beforehand, so just putting on the tyre now. Went on pretty easily. Still quite a bit of movement in the tyre. Doesn't feel too dry or anything. Pumping them up. I think I used about 30 psi in the rear, then a little bit less in the front. Snapping off the old reflector because we don't need those.
Some beautiful Sea Star green brakes for the Shogun. I forgot that it had this with it as well, so we're going to throw that on. Even if I got them from Zane or from Darcy or completely unrelated. One of the 3 options, yeah. I have a bunch of stainless M16 bolts, so we're going to use some of those. Just, yeah. Absolutely beautiful. Sleeve for the brake caliper just sort of shifted in there. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. This side is okay. It's tight on there, but I don't know if that's a manufacturing default or what.
So it turns out that is for a 1-inch headset, the 25.4 outside diameter of a 1-inch stereo tube. So we won't be using that because this is a 1-in-1/8 stereo tube frame. I should have evaporusted some of the parts on these brakes, but it was too late. It's the day the day ending of the cheap bike build off challenge, so don't have enough time anymore. Evaporust normally takes about 24 hours to work pretty effectively. Throwing on the rear wheel now. Beautiful.
This is free, but it's so much bigger. This is definitely going to do the job, but it'll just be a little bit more tucked up in there.
So I decided to use this RX100 remake. I think it would just end up being a bit tidier. It is pretty crusty, so it shouldn't take off too much into the budget. Just $5–10 at the most, I'd say. I think I'd seen like a tidy RX100 for $10, so probably a bit less than that. But just cleaning up the jockey wheels and everything now. It's in perfectly usable condition, just looks a bit scungy. Might get an ultrasonic cleaner at some point, but I find cleaning individual parts quite relaxing to do. So taking that away,
We don't have too much time, so
make things a bit easier, but it'd also be less enjoyable. So don't know if overall I'd like using it more. I don't know where the lid for that went. So every time I'm pouring a little bit of oil, it ends up being a lot of oil. But we can just spread it around. So reassembling it now. Didn't want to go too deep into cleaning this up. It'd be a bit funny having it beautifully polished red derailleur on the bike that has no other polished parts on it. So just give it a bit of a clean up, keep it like the brushed look. Do also have this single speed tensioner. I just don't know if it'll provide enough chain tension between the two gears. So before we test the rear tensioner derailleur situation, we have to put on the front derailleur. So this is the stock one that came on the bike. It's a bottom pull. This is the one we'll be using on the bike, which is a Duo LX top pull. I'm going to be using this basically because I want to mount the shifter in a weird spot.
So I'm wanting to run the shifter.
So I want to mount it up around here somewhere, or maybe by the seat tube intersection here.
A little weird with it.
Only problem is this derailleur needs a shim to fit this seat tube. So I just got this. This is a section of alloy radiator piping. I have this around for cassette spaces and that sort of stuff as well. So just a couple of sections of that, and it seems to fit just fine. Throwing on the chain now before we can test stuff out. Just gonna mock it up, sort of eyeball it. So we need about that much chain taken off. And then without taking out the links, we can sort of throw it around the tensioner and see if it's going to have enough to let us go into that smaller chain ring. But you can see here, it's just definitely not enough.
The tensioner would probably work.
So we're going to have to ditch the chain tensioner and go just use that RX100 mech.
It actually copes.
So throwing that derailleur on. It's quite a small and clean setup anyway, so I'm not too disappointed that the chain tensioner won't work, but certainly would have been a bit nicer to use that instead. The derailleur should guide the chain a bit better onto the freewheel anyway, so not really a huge loss. Just a bit of aesthetics really. Just installing the chain now, but I forgot to put it through the derailleur. Sometimes when you're in a rush, this kind of thing happens. Not really a big deal though. We can take out this lower pulley wheel and sort of open up the derailleur and thread it in that way. That way we don't have to undo the chain again. Just putting in that lower pulley wheel and then tightening it back up.
Like an idiot. Just need that little bit of cable. So I'm thinking of mounting it somewhere up around here. And because it has like the steel band, I could probably just make a shim to go from this diameter to the seat stay diameter. It should be in about that position. That sort of points roughly down to the top of the front mech. So we don't really need a cable outer, but I think I will have a little section. Whether we can get that to stay put up top or if it'll just shift down. If we could have it clocked a little bit down so it points directly, we'll do it that way, but we could probably actually just not use the band and just put a bolt straight through to there, but it might be a bit flimsy though.
So that's it mocked up with just some inner tube to sort of shim the band there. Did like a little bit of testing. Seems to select that gear, but because the shifter isn't solid mounted, that it doesn't really want to stay in place. So I might have to make a little bracket coming off here to hold that, sort of resist it from rotating around. The cable does rub into the barrel adjuster, but we'll see how long it lasts. So the shifter now has an alloy shim, and it also has this little bracket to help keep the band in place, and it's a lot more solid now. It's shifting in and out of gear repeatedly with no movement. It actually shifts really nicely. Having the shifter so close to the front derailleur just works really well. And the rear derailleur takes up the chain slack nicely. So we do have that little bit of inner cable in the rear derailleur to keep the derailleur at the right position.
What?
So this is a bike that I picked up as a parts bike for the cheap bike build-off because it has this 10-speed drivetrain. As a little bit of a bonus, underneath this hideous seat cover it has a charged spoon saddle and a couple of free cockroaches. So we'll be using the saddle on the bike. It's in really good condition. A little bit of sun fade, as you can see on the Charge logo there, right next to the cockroaches. And this basket that we picked up from Daiso for $5. So if you're in Australia and New Zealand, we've got some Daiso stores around, and obviously in other parts of the world. I just don't know if it's in, America and stuff. Got this coloured brake cable outer as well. Beautiful pink to match the decals. Fortunately the handlebars don't match it, but still really cool. Just quickly go over the brakes now. I'm in a bit of a rush. The end of the day marks the end of the cheap bike challenge, and the sun is setting. Don't know if you can see that in the background there, but yeah. Throwing it through this cable sheath. This goes into a steel cable guide. So a lot of GTs and stuff have them as well. That little plastic sheathing helps keep the lever feel quite nice. So setting up the front brake now. I couldn't find the cable hangers that came off the bike, but we used this little DIY one that someone made. Unfortunately, when I was tightening it up, it snapped. So because it was a bolt with a hole drilled through the middle of it, when I was tightening it up, it snapped in half. I don't know how they had it running because it came off a working bike, but I guess they just didn't tighten it up as much. So we've got this other die comp one on now, and that's the bike all together. Beautiful. Sun setting, but just made it just in time. Really cool 2-speed setup on the bike. Chuck some cool stock brake pads on the rear. Just keep the stock pads on the front. Yeah, a little bit of surface rust there, which would have came up with some evapor rust, but oh well, no biggie. Gonna go out for a ride now. First got to check that the rear brakes work. And it's ride time.
back down, I guess. Ooh. Basket offer. I think if I was going to keep this as more of an off-road rig, I'd probably use the inner chainring and the middle one. Because that kind of flow ratio that you need more off-road. But the middle one is low enough for this kind of trail. 32, I think it was. That rock. The front fire, it's grippy as, and so much volume that it's just taking, just taking so much. My head brought that down. Trail breaker, but my head's the trail breaker. It's just taking all of the, well, it's taking a lot of the bumps and stuff out of the trail, which is good because it's quite a rocky and rooty one. The rear full stop brake pads at least work really well. I can do some nice skids. The grips feel really good. Something that you should really do on any bike that you're some kind of upgrade. I don't know. The grips are definitely a nice upgrade. Definitely feel like the contact points, especially if you don't ride with gloves. One of the first things that you should spend like your budget on. Skinny. And then I think probably tires. Tires really changed the way the bike handles and feels. Comfort as well. Seats definitely. Then brakes and pedals. Other than that, as long as the drivetrain works well, you can pretty well make do with like a 3x5 or just whatever the bike comes with. Which is crazy because find something and end up really enjoying it and not being able to bring it home. Pretty hard. I thought we're gonna get a puncher. Fucking some of these fucking trees. I'm not going to be able to fix that. I saw it like the last second, then my helmet sort of caught it. Yeah, we can't fix that. Not without tools and shite.
So going over all the costs now, we bought the bike for 30 New Zealand dollars. The cranks I paid 14 for. Handlebar are priced around $20, although probably a little bit less with all the fading and everything. That's in New Zealand market, so price might vary for you guys. Seat, $10. It was on that parts bike that cost us $30, and I mean, the 10-speed drivetrain is worth a lot more than the rest of it. Stem, $5. Basket hardware, $10. I had that off another bike, and the basket was $5. Some random bolts and little bits and bobs, about $5. Pedals, $10. Front derailleur, $5. Rear derailleur, $10. Freewheel, pricing at $5. Some cables and bits and bobs, about $13. The biggest expense was the grips, which cost the same amount as the bike at $30. And the brake pads are $15 for the cool stops. So that brings us to a total of 187 New Zealand dollars, which is about 114 US dollars. So as for the bike overall, I definitely really recommend doing the 2x1. Just gives you like a really good gearing range. Obviously a triple or 3x7 or something like that would give you more range, but compared to a single speed or two out the back, this is just so much better. Didn't have any chain drops or anything like that. Works really well. I'd probably use a different shifter, like a down tube shifter placed on the top tube or something by the seat tube. But yeah, thanks for checking the video out. I've got another cheap bike build I want to do now that we're in March, but I've also got a couple of clunkers I've got to finish before the end of the month. So those are coming out soon. Thanks for checking the video out, and I'll see you soon. Bye.